The late afternoon light fell across the small apartment like a thin, fading blanket, warm but weak, the kind of warmth that never settled fully. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, shoving his books into his backpack with quick, rigid movements. He avoided looking at his father, who was washing dishes at the sink. They hadn't spoken properly in weeks. Not really. Not beyond the bare minimum. "How was school?" Henry asked suddenly, his voice steady, almost neutral, like he'd practiced sounding casual. Daniel shrugged. "Fine." It wasn't fine, and Henry knew it. The boy's shoulders had been sinking lower every day, his eyes darker under the lashes, the spark he once carried dimming like a bulb about to burn out. But Daniel didn't offer more, and Henry didn't push. Not yet. "Going out again?" Henry asked as Daniel zipped his bag. "Yeah, just stuff." "What stuff?" Daniel stiffened. "Just stuff, Dad." There was something in the boy's voice. Hesitation, fear, something trembling and uncertain. Henry turned off the faucet, dried his hands, and studied his son. 14 years old, slim, quiet. Too quiet lately. He used to chatter endlessly about school, games, friends. Now he rarely spoke. He came home late almost every day, drained, pale, exhausted. "Be home by 7, Henry said, trying not to sound worried, trying not to show the knot tightening in his chest. Daniel nodded quickly and grabbed his hoodie. "Yeah, okay." He walked out with his head lowered, shoulders slightly hunched, not the natural slump of a tired teenager, but a posture that screamed, "I'm carrying something I don't know how to put down." When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt even smaller, even emptier, as if Daniel had carried all the air out with him. Henry rubbed a hand across his face. He couldn't shake it anymore. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Daniel stepped onto the street as if stepping into another world. His breath fogged faintly in the cold air. He shoved his hands deep into his hoodie pockets and walked quickly, glancing over his shoulder once, twice, then again. He didn't see Henry's truck pull out from the far end of the parking lot. He didn't see his father following him. Henry drove slowly, keeping a distance, heart pounding harder with each block. He felt ridiculous, like a paranoid parent spying on his kid, but the fear outweighed the guilt. Over the years, Henry had dealt with his own regrets, his temper, his stubborn silence, the emotional clumsiness of a man who grew up believing fathers needed to be strong, not gentle, strong, not attentive, strong, not vulnerable. He wanted to do better for Daniel. He thought he had. He thought their bond was unbreakable. But something had shifted. Something Daniel was hiding. Henry watched him from a distance as the boy walked past the park, past the bus stop, past the library. He walked faster the farther he went, as if he was racing something no one else could see. After 15 minutes, Daniel turned down a narrow back street that led toward the old industrial district. Quiet, empty, worn down. Henry's stomach dropped. "This isn't where kids hang out," he whispered. He pulled his truck over near a row of shuttered shops and got out, following on foot. Daniel reached a cluster of abandoned warehouses. Rusted metal, broken windows, graffiti, silence. He slipped between two buildings, his breath visible in the dimming light. Henry picked up his pace, heart hammering. Why would a 14-year-old come here? Who is he meeting? What is happening to my son? As Henry reached the corner, he saw Daniel pull his hood tighter and step into the shadow of a warehouse doorway. Henry pressed his back against the wall and peeked carefully. A man stood there, a tall man, much older than Daniel. Henry's blood turned to ice. The man was thin, scruffy, unshaven, wearing an oversized jacket, his movements twitchy, his posture hunched. His eyes darted around cautiously, like someone who didn't want to be seen. Daniel handed him something small. The man grabbed it quickly, stuffing it into his jacket. "Good," the man whispered. "Same time tomorrow." Daniel nodded, voice barely audible. "Okay." Then the man limped away between the warehouses, disappearing into the dusk. Henry's chest tightened so hard it hurt. His breath caught, his vision blurred with panic and dread. His son, quiet, sweet, soft-spoken Daniel, was secretly meeting a strange older man in an abandoned district. No teenager should be here. No father should ever see this. Henry stepped out from behind the wall, voice shaking. "Daniel?" Daniel jerked like he'd been struck. He froze, eyes going wide, mouth falling open in pure terror. "Dad?" he choked. Henry approached slowly, fighting every instinct to shout. "What?" he said, voice harsh despite his effort. "Are you doing out here? Who was that man?" Daniel stepped back, chest heaving. "Dad, please." "Henry, answer me." Daniel swallowed hard, his whole body trembling now. "I can't." Henry stared as if he'd been stabbed. "Can't?" he repeated, voice cracking. "Daniel, are you in trouble?" He grabbed the boy's shoulders gently but firmly. "Is that man hurting you? Threatening you? Are you being forced into something?" Daniel's breath came faster. "No, Dad, please, just go home." "No," Henry barked. "You tell me what's going on right now." Daniel's eyes filled suddenly, painfully, uncontrollably. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't tell you." Henry's chest twisted with fear and fury. "Daniel, if that man is dangerous—" "He's not," Daniel cried. "Then why are you here?" Finally, the dam inside Daniel broke. He shook his head violently, tears spilling to the dirt. Because I'm helping him. He needs me." Henry staggered back as if struck. Helping him what? This boy, his son, his only son, meeting a strange, unstable man in the shadows. Helping him with what? Daniel lowered his head, tears falling to the dirt. "I can't say," he whispered. "You're not supposed to know." Henry's voice rose. "Not supposed to know what?" Daniel cried harder. "Dad, if I tell you," his voice broke, "it'll ruin everything."
Henry heard the words and felt the air leave his lungs. "It'll ruin everything." The boy's voice was so small it barely touched the evening. He knelt down until they were eye to eye, close enough to see the wet rim of Daniel's lashes, the raw set of the child's jaw. "Listen to me," Henry said, quieter than he'd been moments before. "No one is going to ruin your life, not if you tell me the truth." Daniel swallowed and rocked on his heels. He looked like a boy who had been carrying a load too heavy for his small shoulders. For a long breath, he didn't speak. Then he sighed, and the sound seemed older than 12. "It's not what you think. It's not bad." Henry blinked. "Then tell me, right now." Daniel hugged himself, then let his hands fall. He picked at the cuff of his hoodie, thumb worrying at the thread. "His name is Mr. Alvarez. He used to work down by the docks, fixing engines and cars. He's old now. He sleeps in the corner of the warehouse sometimes. He eats from the soup kitchen. His voice cracked. "He fixed my bike that one time when the chain snapped, without taking money. He taught me to find the problem, to stop and check the smallest nut. He said men who can fix things feel useful." Henry remembered the bike with the bent chain, the one Daniel had come home with giggling months ago. He had given thanks to an anonymous neighbor. He hadn't known. Daniel's hands trembled as he spoke on. "He asked me one day if I could bring him some food. I didn't have much, just a sandwich and a little change. I gave it to him. He smiled like he'd been given the sun. After that, I started bringing him something every day. Sometimes he lets me help him with small things, handing a wrench, holding the flashlight. He tells stories about when he was young, when he repaired boats and cars. I listen. It's peaceful." Henry felt a strange, dislocated ache, part relief, part something sharper. Relief because the scene he had imagined, danger, bad men, drugs, worse, hadn't been true. Sharper because Daniel had kept this from him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked again, softer. Daniel's lip trembled. "Because you always worry. You always say, 'Don't go near those places. Kids draw trouble.' I thought you'd say I was stupid for going alone. I thought if I told you, you'd stop me. And I thought Mr. Alvarez needs someone. I thought if I had to earn a bit, if I did small things for him, maybe I could help him buy medicine. Maybe I could help pay for a night at the shelter. I didn't want you to worry. I just wanted to help." Henry swallowed a dry sound. The kid had been giving away his smallness, his spare coins, his lunch money to another man's life. A boy should not have to patch the world that way. That thought pressed at him like a fist. He looked at Daniel's hands, small, pale, knuckles faintly scabbed from the chain repair, and something in him shifted. Fury at being kept in the dark still simmered, but it was leavened now with a different heat, admiration and a kind of shame. "You've been going after school to help an old man, and you've been hiding it because I was afraid I'd what, get mad?" Daniel nodded once, like a small, guilty animal. "I was scared you'd tell me it wasn't my place, that I was jeopardizing us, that you'd take away what little I could give." Henry felt the absurdity of that truth. He'd built a wall of rules because he thought they protected Daniel, but the wall had also kept his son from learning how to be kind on his own terms. He took a breath that felt too big for his lungs and let anger slip away like steam. "You didn't jeopardize anything," he said quietly. "You were helping someone. That is not a crime." Daniel looked up, small hope flickering. "You're not mad?" "Mad?" Henry repeated. He swallowed, searching for a word that would mean the right thing. "I'm proud, and also stupid because I didn't see. I thought you were secretive or—" He stopped himself. Words felt clumsy against the sudden intimacy of what Daniel had done. Daniel's face softened. He leaned toward Henry as if to test the warmth. "He talks about his wife, says he misses her. He keeps a photo in his jacket that he shows me sometimes. He doesn't have anyone. He says the harbor remembers him. He says the world keeps what it can." A memory rose in Henry. A photograph of a younger him and a woman laughing in a much gentler life, held at the back of a drawer and rarely taken out. He remembered a time when helping someone had been the easiest thing. Now he had to relearn it, with the clumsy awkwardness of a man who'd built his life from beams and contracts. "Don't go tonight," he said then, because it came out of the parental reflex first. He hated the idea of his son walking after dark into shadowed warehouses. He hated thinking about the dangers he had imagined an hour ago. "Let me come with you tomorrow. You don't have to do this alone." Daniel's brow furrowed. He stared at the scuffed toe of his sneaker, as if counting the cost. "No." The single syllable held more than a refusal. It was an insistence that the boy's small autonomy mattered. "Please, Dad. If you come, he'll stop opening up. He doesn't want people to fuss over him. He said so." Henry felt a tug, the memory of a man who taught his son to hold a wrench without condescension. He thought of the look Mr. Alvarez gave when Daniel had helped the bike, as if he'd been given something precious in return. Maybe the older man needed a friend as much as he needed bread. Maybe what Daniel gave, exactly because it was small and secret, mattered. He sat back on his heels. His boots left dust on the pavement, a phenomena of the life he built with his hands. He rubbed the back of his neck and tried again. "Okay," he said finally. "You keep going for now, but you promise me you'll be careful. No rooftops, no strangers asking you to go deeper into the docks, no trading anything, no taking rides with anyone. If anything feels wrong, text me, call me, I'll come." Daniel's shoulders eased like a held breath released. "I promise." Henry's voice softened. "And the money, where does it come from? You don't have a job, Daniel." Daniel's gaze flicked away. "Sometimes I do little jobs. I mow for Mrs. Klein. I wash Mr. Patel's car. I save the coins. I give what I can. It's not much.
Henry nodded slowly, a tight smile forming for the first time that evening. You shouldn't carry bills on your shoulders. Not now, not at 12. His tone was fierce, almost protective in a way that surprised even him. But if you choose to help, I want to be involved. Let me know. If you're saving, tell me. If you're hungry, say so. Don't be a secret soldier. Daniel laughed softly, wet with relief. That sounds like the worst plan, but okay. The light along the edge of the warehouse strip deepened to indigo. A horn sounded far away. The city exhaled. They stood there for a long minute, father and son, two silhouettes against the dying day, bound by a new and fragile understanding. Henry reached down and ruffled Daniel's hair in a gesture that might have meant nothing to anyone else, but to Daniel, it meant everything. Tomorrow, Henry said gently, tomorrow I'll bring sandwiches and a thermos. You tell me where, and I'll be there, but only if you want me to. Daniel looked up, eyes bright and earnest. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have to hide what he did after school. Okay, he said, tomorrow. They walked home together without saying much more, footsteps in sync, two heartbeats learning the same rhythm. Outside, in the shadow of the warehouses, a man in a tattered jacket watched them from a distance for a heartbeat, and then turned away as if he'd seen something he liked, a small repair being made.
The next afternoon, Henry woke before the city did. He made 2 sandwiches, peanut butter, one of the few things Daniel always liked, wrapped them in wax paper, and poured steaming tea into a thermos. He told himself it was practical, that it was simple fatherly provision. But under that practicality, there was something else, a desire to be where his son's small life met the harder edges of the world. He drove the truck to the industrial strip and waited parked in the shadow of a shuttered storefront, hands folded over the steering wheel, listening to the city unfold like a slow, indifferent clock. He had a dozen questions and only one rule. He would not scare Daniel. He would not bark orders or make the boy shrink. He would come soft, like someone trying to learn how to be a better parent. Daniel arrived just after 5, hoodie up, cheeks flushed from the walk. He moved like someone carrying a secret habit, part furtive, part proud. When he saw the truck, his shoulders tightened. For a moment, Henry feared he'd ruined whatever fragile trust the boy had given him. But Daniel took a breath and walked up to the truck anyway, carrying a small, beaten toolbox. Henry opened the door and waved him over. "Sandwich?" he offered, voice awkward but steady. Daniel blinked, surprised and pleased. "You brought—" "Thermos too," Henry said, "and some socks if it's cold." He slid one of the sandwiches into Daniel's hand. Daniel took it like someone accepting an unexpected gift. They walked together toward the warehouse cluster, the two of them small against rust and sky. The doorway was the same place Henry had seen the previous night, a broken frame, a shifted plywood board, a smell of old oil and damp fabric. Inside the doorway, on a threadbare blanket, Mr. Alvarez sat cross-legged, thin coat pulled tight. He looked older up close. Lines like map folds, hands like small sculptures of scars and work. But his eyes were 2 sharp, bright pennies, quick to light. Daniel hesitated, then stepped forward. "Mr. Alvarez," he said softly, as if the name itself was sacred. Alvarez looked up and smiled with a toothless, weathered grin. "Hey, Chico, you brought a friend." Daniel said, "This is my dad." Mr. Alvarez's smile softened and stretched into something like welcome. "Ah, the big man. Come near. Sit." Henry kept his posture casual, as if he were visiting a neighbor at a gate. He could feel Daniel's little hand brush his sleeve as he sat. The old man accepted the thermos and sandwich with both hands, reverential, like it was the sort of ceremony that had once made up his days. They settled on mismatched crates. Henry watched the exchange, the way Mr. Alvarez spoke a language that mixed Spanish and broken English, how Daniel answered with the patience of someone who had listened to him for months. He listened like he was learning the grammar of a new life. After the small talk about tools, about how the city ate and returned people, Henry finally asked the thing that buzzed under everything. "You fix bikes for him?" he said carefully. Alvarez looked at Daniel and then at Henry with a slow, appraising gaze. "He fixed things," he said. "Sometimes I fix machines. Sometimes I fix people. The hands remember how." Henry's chest tightened. He remembered the neatness of his own hands after a day of work, calloused, confident. He felt suddenly raw, like a man who had only learned to build walls and not bridges. "So why are you here?" Henry asked, trying to keep the question open, not accusatory. The old man sipped the tea slowly. "Used to be, I fixed engines down at the harbor. Boats, trucks, whatever the tide left. Years ago, I had a shop. Name on the door. My wife, she baked and brought bread for the crew. She had a laugh like heat. Then paper asked for my name, work dried, family left, and the shop closed." He shrugged. "A pebble of air. I learned to carry small things. I learned to carry silence too." He looked at Daniel with that soft, crooked kindness. "Then the boy came. He brought light. I teach him a thing. He brings me sandwich. We both get up in morning." Henry swallowed. Your wife." He blinked once. "Si, Maria. She loved the harbor." He tapped his chest. "Si, in my pocket now." He reached inside his worn jacket and showed a small, faded photograph folded twice. A woman, young and bright, flower on her cheek, smiling like the world was new. Daniel's voice softened. "He says she taught him to make the best empanadas." He laughed, a fragile sound. Henry felt the humor like a warm wind. "She sounds wonderful," he said. She was, and the harbor remembers. People forget. Henry's jaw tightened, not in anger now, but with recognition. He caught himself thinking of his own wife, gone these 6 years, and the loneliness that had calcified into his tired shoulders. He realized with a sudden clarity why Daniel might seek a different kind of company, not to hide from him, but to collect the pieces of a world that had lost its edges. "Why didn't you tell me?" Henry asked Daniel, not as a scold, but as a man seeking honest explanation. Daniel chewed slowly, fingers worrying a loose thread on the thermos. "Because I didn't want you to be sad. You're already sad a lot. You look tired, Dad. I wanted you to smile when I was around." Henry felt the statement like a small stone lodged in his chest. The child had been guarding his father's grief. Alvarez watched their exchange with the indulgent calm of a man who'd seen secrets and kept them. Young boys do brave things in small ways. They think to patch what big hands have broken. Henry laughed, a sudden short sound that held sorrow. "Sometimes my big hands make the little things worse." His eyes found the old man. "You teach him all this, and you let him be a boy?" "I let him be," he corrected. "He helps and he learns. Being useful keeps him out of trouble. Being told always what to do makes him small." Henry thought about the times he'd shouted rules, the times he'd thought discipline would sculpt Daniel into safety. He now saw, sharp and a little ashamed, that his rules had sometimes made the boy hide kindness behind silence. The old man's gaze turned to Henry. "You are a good father, see? You work. You make sure the boy has roof. But the boy needs father hands to also show up on steps, not only on bills." Those words settled into his ribs. He felt a sudden fierce desire to repay the debt of absence, to show up not only with money, but with presence. He also felt a different, more immediate urge to learn, to ask how he could help without stealing Daniel's private kindness. "Teach me," Henry said simply. "Teach me what to do. Tell me what's safe. Tell me how to help." Alvarez grinned, the smile folding the old lines around his eyes. Bring more sandwiches tomorrow and some warm socks, and ask him to show you one wrench trick. Sit and drink and listen. Do not try to fix his memories. Only be tool when he needs you." Henry nodded, the instructions oddly precise and humble. He felt a small relief, like an old machine clicking correctly after repair. They sat a while longer, the sun sliding down and painting the corrugated metal in long gold. Alvarez told a small story about a boat that wouldn't start until the crew sang to it. Daniel laughed. Henry laughed too, the sound rusty but true. When it was time to leave, Alvarez put a calloused hand on Henry's forearm. "You are a good man. You work. You care. But remember, sometimes to be father means to carry little things." Henry stood in the doorway as the two of them watched the man walk back into the dim, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could see a shape to what comes next. Smaller steps, sandwiches, learning how to sit and listen. Not heroic leaps or dramatic fixes, but just human work. He realized, with a thud of gratitude and mild shame, that what had frightened him most was not Daniel's secret, but that the boy had been alone carrying the burden of his father's life. On the drive home, Henry held the wheel with both hands and promised himself the small things this time. He would bring sandwiches. He would come on Sundays. He would sit and ask and learn to be the kind of man his son needed. And in the back of his mind, a whisper. The world doesn't only ask men to be builders of walls. Sometimes it asks them to be builders of benches, places where people can sit and be mended.
The weeks that followed were quiet work, not the loud, proud work Henry did with beams and bolts, but soft persistence. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, warm socks left at the warehouse, a thermos on a hot afternoon, questions asked without accusation. It felt strange to him at first, like learning to use the left hand after a lifetime of right-handed certainty, but the awkwardness melted the more he practiced it. Daniel kept going. He brought wrenches and a small flashlight. He learned to hand the tools in the right order. He learned to tighten a bolt without stripping the thread. Mr. Alvarez taught him the etiquette of small repairs. Measure twice, turn slow, listen to the sound a thing makes when it wants to be fixed. Henry sat and watched, sometimes helping by holding a light or carrying a box, other times just being present, breathing steady. That presence changed the air between father and son. Daniel stopped hiding little things in his pockets. He told Henry when he had given his lunch away. He told him where Mr. Alvarez slept and what song the old man hummed when he was happy. Henry listened. He asked questions that invited stories instead of answers that judged. He learned the flavor of his son's compassion. One pale Sunday morning, Henry woke early and drove to the shelter downtown. He stood in the doorway of the office until someone noticed him, a volunteer with tired eyes and a good smile, and asked how she could help. "I want to know how to support someone," he said. "A man who used to work at the docks. He needs a bed some nights. I can bring food, I can maybe fix a thing, but I want to do it right." She handed him a clipboard and a list of needs: blankets, warm socks, medical checkups. "We're happy for any support," she said, "and if you can help with odd jobs around here, we have names we can refer." Henry signed up for a weekend of volunteer repairs. He felt clumsy the first time, unsure what to say to the men who had lived on sidewalks and in doorways, but there was a quiet dignity to the work. Fix a door hinge, mend a torn jacket, change a bulb in a community room, small stitches in a bigger frayed cloth. When Daniel came to the shelter that Saturday with Alvarez, he watched them both go inside like he was witnessing something miraculous. Alvarez, thin but upright, accepted help with the humility of a man who understood the dignity in receiving. Daniel walked beside Henry with his shoulders back a little more. Henry felt pride, like a steady, warm light. At home, bills still came. The landlord still reminded him about rent. Life still had edges, but something had been rebalanced. The apartment felt fuller, not cluttered, but occupied by conversation.
Daniel brought home stories of people who had taught him small, useful things. Henry brought home the comfort of being useful in different ways. One evening, a harsh knock woke them both. Henry opened the door to find a young man in a rumpled suit holding a clipboard, the landlord. The tone in the man's voice was official, but not unkind. He said, "We're short on rent this month, and we've had a couple of noise complaints. You understand the terms, Mr. Morales." Henry felt a familiar panic flare, a cold remembrance of sleepless nights, but something steadier held him now. He looked at Daniel, who stood behind him with a small, steady posture. Henry had learned to measure fear and not be ruled by it. "We're working on it," Henry said. "I've taken a few odd jobs and I'm helping at the shelter on weekends. I can give you a part this week and the rest next." The landlord glanced at Daniel and then at the small stack of papers taped to their fridge, volunteer schedules, a printed letter from the shelter thanking them for help. He raised an eyebrow. "I could use a hand fixing a door at my office," he said slowly. "You do repairs, don't you? Maybe you could trade some labor for time." Henry blinked, surprised. It wasn't charity, it was exchange. Not the kind that humiliated, but the kind that honored the work on both sides. He agreed. It meant a week of long hours and sore hands, but that night he slept differently, knowing he would meet the debt with his own effort. Weeks passed. The landlord's office door was fixed, the rent got covered, and Daniel watched his father go about the contracts with a new light in his eyes. Less of the tired man who came home, and more of the man who had found ways to respond to hardship rather than be defeated by it. At school, Daniel's teachers noticed changes too. He participated more, his voice steady when he answered questions. On a class assignment, he wrote about community repair and placed Mr. Alvarez at the center of his piece. The teacher read it aloud in class. When Daniel came home, he found Henry waiting on the couch with open arms and no reproach, only celebration. One rainy night, Mr. Alvarez fell ill. Henry received the call from Daniel in the shelter's small office. He drove as fast as he could, hands clenched, heart thudding. In the dim corridor of the community clinic, Alvarez lay wrapped in a donated blanket, breathing in shallow, measured pulls. Daniel sat beside the old man and held his hand, small and steady. Henry knelt across from them and felt something break open, fear and gratitude braided together. He listened as Alvarez mumbled about his wife and an old boat that wouldn't start. He listened and he held, and the guardrails he'd built around his heart softened. For days, Henry visited the clinic with sandwiches, with socks, with the awkward presence of a man trying to learn how to comfort another. He signed Alvarez in for a checkup, arranged with the shelter for recovery support, and called an old friend who knew a doctor. These were not heroic acts. They were plumbing and small kindnesses, but they were acts Henry wouldn't have performed 6 months before. When Alvarez recovered enough to be discharged, he hugged Henry with a gratitude that left both men trembling. He said, "You came. You brought a boy and hot tea. You fixed a thing inside me." Daniel, watching, tucked his head against Henry's chest. The father and son sat on a bench outside the clinic in the thin gray sun and did not speak for a long time. When Henry finally put an arm around Daniel, the boy turned his face up and smiled, a true, open smile that reached his eyes. Later, at home, Daniel unfolded a piece of paper from his backpack. His class had arranged a small project to help the elderly, and his teacher wanted to include Mr. Alvarez. He had made a short list of supplies and a schedule. Henry read it and then read it again. "You did this," he said. "We did this," Daniel corrected. Henry looked at him and then down at his own hands, calloused, scarred, useful. "We did. We did." That night, Henry tucked Daniel into bed the way he had learned to do, not as an obligation, but as a ritual that mattered. Daniel closed his eyes with the quiet contentment of someone who is safe to dissolve into sleep. Henry turned off the light and stood watching him for a moment, feeling the ordinary miracle of a house that had been repaired piece by piece. Outside, the city moved on with its indifferent rhythm. Inside, two people who had once stood apart had learned how to repair one another. The old man at the docks had been mended by sandwiches and socks and by being seen. A landlord who had been an adversary became a man to trade labor with. A boy who'd carried his father's worry alone learned he could share it. And a father who thought strength lived in silence discovered strength lived in listening. When Henry finally lay down that night, his hands were heavy with work and light with purpose. He thought about all the things he could never go back and fix, the years he had missed, the small cruelties his silence had caused, and felt the ache of them. But over that ache, there was a new current, a commitment to the daily repair, to the small acts that add up. Because he had learned slowly, clumsily, faithfully, that some repairs last longer than a day's work. They are the kind you do with sandwiches, with a thermos, with a steady presence. They are the kind you do beside a warehouse door and at a kitchen table, and they are the ones that keep a family from falling apart. Outside, in the dark, the harbor boats foamed and creaked, indifferent and constant. Inside, in the small apartment, a father and son slept at peace, two repaired things moving forward together.